Hi everyone. My name is Jackie, and this is going to be our introduction. So, the name of our group is the Fantastic Six. Our members are Tang, Felicia, Jocelyn, Maya, Jackie, and Samantha. And our thesis statement and what we're going to be introducing and presenting to you guys is genetically modified organisms, better known as GMOs. And here we have the preview of our presentation. And what we want to start our presentation with is an attention getter, and what we decided to put was the estimate or statistics, sorry. It has been estimated that upwards of 75% of processed foods on the supermarket shelves, from soda to soup, crackers to condiments, contain genetically engineered ingredients. And we got that quote from the Center for Food Safety. And it's crazy to know that more than 50% of everything you're going to be buying has some type of genetically engineered ingredients. So next up, we're going to have Jocelyn, and she's going to be speaking about the history of GMOs.
Thank you, Tung. Hello, everyone. My name is Jocelyn Torres, and my subtopic is the history, science, who, and the corp early tech advancements of GMOs. So we're going to talk about the history of GMOs. For thousands of years, people have worked to improve crops, livestock, and the foods we eat in the 20th century. Scientists found a way to modify food faster and more precisely by changing an organism's DNA. This process is called genetic engineering. It produces genetically modified organisms. This timeline highlights the key dates in the development of GMO foods. Starting from 1940 to 1953, plant breeders learned to use radiation or chemicals to randomly change an organism's DNA. Building on the discoveries of chemist Rosalind Franklin, scientists James Watson and Francis Crick, and they identify the structure of DNA. And then from 1973 to 1982, biochemists Herbert Boyer and Stanley Cohen developed genetic engineering by inserting DNA from one bacteria into another. FDA approves the first consumer GMO product developed through genetic engineering, human insulin to treat diabetes. 1986 to 1992, the federal government establishes the coordinated framework for the regulation of biotechnology. This policy describes how FDA, USDA, and EDA work together to regulate the safety of GMOs. FDA policy states that foods from GMO plants must meet the same requirements, including the same safety standards as foods delivered from traditionally bred plants. In the 1994s to the 1990s, the first GMO produce created through genetic engineering, a GMO tomato. It becomes available for sale after studies evaluated by federal agencies provided it to be as safe as traditionally bred tomatoes. The first wave of GMO produce created through genetic engineering becomes available to consumers: summer squash, soybeans, cotton, corn, papayas, tomatoes, potatoes, and canola. Not all are still available for sale. In 2003 to 2005, the World Health Organization and the Food and Agricultural Organization of the United Nations developed international guidelines and standards to determine the safety of GMO foods. GMO, alfalfa, and sugar for sale in the U.S. 2015 to 2016, FDA approves an application for the first genetic modification in an animal for use as food, a generically engineered salmon. Congress passes a law requiring labeling for the same foods produced through a genetic engineering and uses the term bioengineered, which will start to appear on some foods. 2017 to 2019, GMO apples are available for sale in the U.S. FDA completes consultation on first food from a genome-edited plant. So for the science of GMOs, a number of scientific studies done over the benefits and risks of GM crops were in collaboration with GM corporations themselves. Many third-party scientists believe that the conflict of interest associated with research scientists working under GM corporation guidelines increases the risk for bias in study and results to unfairly favor GM products. Many GM corporations respond by stating they comply with GM crop approval guidelines for mainstream consumption. For the WHO, the World Health Organization, and the Food and Agricultural Organization of the United Nations develop international guidelines and standards to determine the safety of GMO foods. GM foods currently available on the international market have passed safety assessments and are not likely to present risks for human health. In addition, no effects on human health have been shown as a result of the consumption of such foods by the general population in the countries where they have been approved. So for the corporations, there are many companies which are known for their GMO manufacturers. The biggest GMO corporations are BASF, DuPont, Dow Chemical Company, Monsanto, and Syngenta. They're well known because they dominate the agricultural market, that is, they own the world's seed, pesticide, biotechnology industries. Early technology, genetically modified organisms are produced using scientific methods that include recombinant DNA technology and also reproductive cloning. Recently, the researchers developed a new technology called CRISPR, which takes advantage of bacterial systems to simplify genetic editing, allowing for easier development of GE organisms. This technology could be used to expedite development of useful GE crops, facilitate disease elimination, or even alter entire ecosystems. In conclusion, genetically modified foods have enormous potential to save money, eliminate poverty, reduce hunger and malnutrition, and promote innovative practices. Some individuals believe GM foods infringe on the environment and human health. However, I believe that these concerns are demise and unwarranted, but GMOs hold great potential. It promises solutions to our food problems by making crops more resilient, fruitful, and nutritious. GMOs have been shown to not have significant adverse effects on our health or the environment, while also having positive impacts to sustainability. Here we have Tung introducing the pro section of our presentation.
So today I want to talk about the pro section of the GMO food. The advantage of the GMO food are that the genetically modified organism GMO are usually cheaper than the other normal and traditional foods. The genetically modified organism GMO food usually have more nutrition and nutrients than the other normal and conventional food. First main point is that the genetically modified organism GMO food are usually cheaper than the other normal, traditional and conventional foods because the GMO food need and use less water, less land, and less pesticides, and less insecticides, and less environmental resource to interrupt the disease and ground. Based on the evidence-based pros and cons of the GMO food journal in the Insider source, the author Madeline Kennedy also stated that the GMO food, such as the corn, the beets, and the soybean price have declined by 15% to 30% because the GMO food consume and use less water, less land, less environmental resource, and less pesticide. So that's why GMO food are usually cheaper than the other normal and conventional food. Now, the second main point is that many GMO food, such as the high oleic soybeans and the bio-fortified golden rice, usually have more nutrition and nutrients than the other conventional and traditional foods because the alteration and modification genes select can enrich the vitamin, the mineral, and the fatty acid content of the high oleic soybean and in the biofortified golden rice, and also based on the unfairly demonized GMO crops can help find malnutrition journal in the Alien for Science source. The writer Daniel Norio also highlight that the modified African corn include and has 2 times more folate than the traditional and conventional African corn, and the outright and modified African corn also contain 6 times so much vitamin C than the traditional and conventional African corn. And the modified African corn has 169 times as much beta carotene than the traditional and conventional African corn. And the GMO golden rice also met the high levels of beta carotene. So therefore, the many GMO food usually have more nutrition and nutrients than the other conventional and traditional food because the alteration and modification gene select can enrich the vitamin, the minerals, and the fatty acid content in this GMO food. Now, the third main one is that many GMO foods such as high oleic soybeans, the biofortified golden rice, the modified genes form of the African corn, and the modified BT corn are safe and good, beneficial, and clean for the customer health and for making the clean environment because many modified GMO food above use and consume less pesticides and insecticides than the other traditional and conventional foods. Based on the Britannica source, the pro and cons GMO article also show that many modified GMO food such as the high oleic soybeans, the biofortified golden rice, the modified genes form of the African corns, and the modified BT corns consume and use less pesticide and release less carbon and carbon dioxide gas into environment. So that's why many GMO food above are good, safe, beneficial for the health of the customer and for making the clean environment. In conclusion, the pros of the GMO food such are that many GMO food such as high oleic soybeans, the biofortified golden rice, the modified genes form of the African corn, and the modified BT corn are usually cheaper than the other conventional and traditional food. And many GMO food usually have more nutrition and nutrients than the other conventional and traditional food. And many GMO foods are safe, beneficial, and good for the people's health and for making the clean environment. However, GMO food are not perfect and it's possible for them to cause some issues. Here is the Maya with the cons of the GMO.
Thank you, Tung, for informing us of the pros of GMOs. My name is Maya, and now I'll be discussing the cons of genetically modified organisms. GMOs are known for being a savior in the agricultural world. They provide a lot of the population with food that without GMOs wouldn't have been previously possible. However, they do have some widespread issues. GMOs can affect the allergic reactions, they are monopolized, and they can bolster an unsustainable farming system. GMOs are linked to rising allergic reactions. According to the Genetic Literacy Project, cross-pollination occurs when genetically modified food comes into contact with non-genetically modified food. And this can be dangerous because it creates new proteins and gets into people's digestive systems that they haven't been too exposed to previously. This is territory that we have not been scientists have not discovered yet, so it's very dangerous when cross-pollination happens and foods develop new proteins that have not been discovered previously. And though we do have to discuss that the FDA has never found links of GMOs contribute to allergic reactions, there is a correlation between rising food allergies with exposure to GMOs, a 5 to 7% increase. GMO companies are monopolized. The big six are the biggest GMO and pesticide companies in the world, and they rule everything globally that has to do with GMOs and pesticides. They consist of BASF, Bayer, DuPont, Dow Chemical Company, Monsanto, and Syngenta. Bayer, though, acquired Monsanto in a deal in 2018, so now it's only 5 companies. However, the top 10 corporations market share of the global pesticides market. The top 10 corporations rule about 70% of all the market shares. This is a little scary. This causes problems because it limits competition, and small farmers are forced to buy seed from these companies, and making the farmers rely on the big companies' business. And this is according to the PCC markets. Lastly, GMOs promote an unsustainable farming system. According to greenamerica.org, genetically modified crops can add to the already hurting climate. Living in a capitalist society, companies prioritize profits over everything else. This is making crops that are genetically modified to withstand herbicide and pesticides allow for farmers to douse their crops with these chemicals. In turn, these chemicals affect soil deposits, air quality, and even water sources around the planet crops. There are also concerns of creating monocultures because of simply planting the same seeds over and over again, due to them being cheap and being easy to grow. This has a negative impact on biodiversity on certain land areas because we need biodiversity to create a thriving ecosystem. Lastly, GMOs can negatively impact our natural pollinators because of the pesticide placed inside of genetically modified crops, killing insects like bees are important to our environment to grow crops overall. In conclusion, genetically modified organisms, still having a good reputation, are linked to rising allergic reactions, are currently monopolized, and create environmental chaos. We cannot ignore the downside of the business practice of genetically modified crops. Yes, of course, GMOs have improved the livelihood of billions of people globally, but we have to regulate and improve how they are used, especially when they are planted in the farms. Now it's for you to decide. Here's Jackie with whether you should or shouldn't care that GMOs in almost every grocery store around the world.
Thank you, Maya, for that introduction. Hi, everyone. My name is Jackie once again, and today I'm going to be speaking about caring about GMOs or not. So, as we heard the pros and cons from Tung and Maya, I'm going to be speaking about, or I'm just going to be providing to you guys the facts about why we should and shouldn't care, and just allow you guys to make your own decision. So, for the reason why we should care is because it poses a possible health risk, but at the same time, we shouldn't care because although it is a possible health risk, there hasn't been anything scientifically proven. So for my first main point, as I mentioned again, the possible health risk it poses. So statistics have shown that the health of many Americans in recent years is declining heavily, and we can't for sure blame it on GMOs. But I included a quote that said, in that time, official government statistics shows that chronic illness has increased steeply in the US, and without muddling causation and correlation, a link with GMO and associated toxic chemicals has yet to be ruled out. So we can't officially roll out GMOs, but we can't also say that that's the reason why the health of many Americans is going to be declining or is declining already. And then from the World Health Organization, for my last bullet point, or the last thing I'm going to be talking about for this section, they included a list of reasons why GMOs pose a possible health risk. And I'm just going to be reading them out loud to you, which are tendencies to provoke allergic reactions, components thought to have nutritional or toxic properties, the stability of the inserted gene, the nutritional effects associated with genetic modification, and any unintended effects which could result from the gene insertion. And now I'm going to be moving on to why we shouldn't care. So research hasn't proven anything solid. So I did tons of research, and I just couldn't find anything that was for sure. Everything was just scientifically, or not scientifically, but like a scientific theory to say. I read on an article that they wanted to make labels that clearly state that your food is going to be and contain ingredients that are genetically modified, or the ingredients or the product itself is genetically modified. And the people who are voting against it said that they didn't want to cause chaos because no one has been able to prove anything solid yet about why GMOs are affecting our health. So if they make labels saying that the food is genetically modified, it's going to cause chaos, and it's just going to make people panic over something that scientifically can't be proven. So even here in California, they wanted to start making these labels to let people know that their foods are genetically modified. However, that bill did not pass. And in the article I read, it had this quote that said, opponents of GMO labeling, including major growers and biotech companies, have argued that genetic engineering is safe and labels are not necessary. So that's about it that I have for why we should or should not care about GMOs, and I'm just going to allow you guys to make your own decision. All I did was provide the facts for you guys. So now I'm going to be moving on to my third and last point. So I'm going to be talking about the foods that are most genetically modified. So some of the most genetically modified foods include sugar, papaya, milk, or really any dairy type of products, because they tend to use growth hormones for the animals that are producing, whatever they're producing, to allow them to speed up the process and grow faster so they could produce the foods. So while doing research, the most foods that popped up as genetically modified were corn and soybeans. So I'm going to be going over a little bit about both of them. So corn is much easier to grow because you don't need a whole field of land or anything. You can do it like on a small piece of land while using less pesticides and less water. So that's what makes it easier to grow. And about 80% of genetically modified corn is in Canada, or is grown in Canada, and it's used as ingredients that are in processed food or animal feed. And then the second genetically modified food that I found a lot was soybeans. And most of these soybeans are going to be grown internationally in places such as Brazil, Argentina, China, and India. So now I'm just going to be going over my conclusion and everything I spoke about today. So what I spoke about today was why we should or shouldn't care about genetically modified foods. And I'm just going to allow you guys, the listeners, to make a decision about what you think we should do. And then additionally, I just included some examples of foods that are genetically modified. And then next up, we're going to have Felicia, and she's going to be speaking about the process of making GMO foods.
Hi, my name is Felicia, and I'm with Group One. We are called the Fantastic Six. Today, I'll be talking about the process of GMOs. which stands for genetically modified organisms. GM is a technology that involves inserting DNA into the genome of an organism. To produce a genetically modified plant, new DNA is then transferred into plant cells. Usually, the cells are then grown into tissue cultures where they develop into plants. The seeds produced by these plants will then inherit the new DNA. There are many different ways to get a genetically modified plant, but today I'll be giving you 2 examples of how to get a GM plant. Example 1, the first stage in making a GM plant requires transfer of a DNA into a plant cell. One of the methods used to transfer DNA is to use bacterium or a virus. There are many viruses and bacteria that transfer the DNA into a host cell as a normal part of their life cycle. For GM plants, the bacterium most frequently used is called Agrobacterium tumefaciens. The gene of interest is then transferred into the bacterium, and the bacterial cells then transfer the new DNA to the genome of the plant cells. So in the picture, it shows how the bacterium is created or is carrying that gene and then inserted into the plant, which then inherits that new gene and then makes that new plant. And for example number 2, another method used to transfer or to make GM plants is called the particle gun method. And how this method is used is to transfer the DNA is to coat the surface of small medical particles with a relevant DNA fragment and bombard the particles into the plant cells. Millions of DNA-coated medical particles are shot and target cells or tissue using a biologistic device or gene gun. The DNA elutes off the particles that lodge inside the cells, and a portion may be stably incorporated in the host chromosomes. So you can see in the picture how it's shooting out the medical particles all over the plants, and then they inherit that new gene and make that new plant. Conclusion, genetic modification of plants involves adding a specific stretch of DNA into the plant's genome, giving it a new different characteristic. This could include changing the way the plant grows or making it resistant to a particular disease. And that's how we get all of these beautiful fruits and vegetables.
All right. And then here is our conclusion. So I'm just going to be restating our group name and our members. So our group name is the Fantastic Six. We are Group One. Our members are Tung, Felicia, Jocelyn, Maya, Jackie, and Samantha. Today, what we presented to you all was the process of making GMOs. Here's a review of our presentation and our speakers. First speaker was Jocelyn, and her topic was the history of GMOs. And then our second speaker was Tung, and he was speaking about the advantages or the pros of GMOs. Then after him was Maya with the cons of GMOs. And then Jackie, she was speaking about caring about GMO foods. And then lastly, we had Felicia, and her topic was about the process of making GMO foods. So we want to wrap up our conclusion with a question. We wanted to know if you guys would still buy genetically modified foods or if you guys would switch to organic food after finding out what you did in our presentation. Go ahead and let us know. And thank you guys for listening.